Hello and welcome to Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface, talkSPORT's chief football correspondent Alex Crook, and the one and only former West Ham and England striker, Dean Ashton, who joins us on the pod. This is what's coming up on today's show.
Some of the chances are excellent chances that you would expect a top striker to take. At the moment, it seems like a lot of people are probably having a bit of a chuckle as if he's the type of player that will never get it right. I think he will.
I actually didn't think it was a foul. I thought that Gabriel had stooped down to head the ball away and Joel Linton had just put his hands on his back. I don't think he pushed him. It certainly wasn't like a forceful push that pushed him to the ground. He was already going down.
Since the Tottenham-Liverpool game, it feels like every decision they're taking a long time to make sure that it's right, and they're probably checking absolutely everything so they don't miss anything.
And then you've got the goalkeeping situation where Aaron Ramsdale looked a little bit nervous and made a couple of errors against West Ham, certainly one error in midweek. David Raya looks a bag of nerves every time they take the pitch. So again, he's created a situation there where neither goalkeeper really knows if they're the number one or not. I think the decisions that Mikel Arteta made in this summer transfer window are going to cost Arsenal a shot at the title. I don't see them as contenders, and I think that's on him.
Hello, gents. Everyone okay? Dino, welcome back to the pod. You all right?
Yeah, very well. Thanks for having me back on.
You've had a busy week this weekend. I heard you losing your mind at a decision that was given against the Wolverhampton Wanderers on Saturday evening. Have you come down from that yet?
Just about. I mean, the problem is I've actually been that person that wins the penalty, so I know exactly what Baldock did, which is probably why it got to me so much, and just felt a little bit sorry for Wolves, to be honest.
Crookie, you've been out and about this weekend, haven't you? You were at Luton versus Liverpool on Sunday in what was an epic game, really, in a sense. In that, obviously, Luton was so close to winning it, but when you don't win it, if you're going to draw a game, then you don't really mind that it's Luis Diaz who ends up getting the goal, do you?
Absolutely. It was a brilliant afternoon, brilliant atmosphere. I think Luton made it difficult for Liverpool, but Liverpool made it difficult for themselves with the number of chances that Darwin Nunez in particular missed. But it was a great advert for the Premier League, because I'm not being a Premier League snob here, but you just don't really get that kind of game in other countries where the supposed whipping boys of the Premier League can come so close to beating the former European champions and the former Premier League winners. It was brilliant.
There was a great statistic this week, actually. It was suggesting that the gap between the top and the bottom had got to the point where it was almost unbridgeable. The four teams that were in the top four places before the start of the season, before the start of the weekend, were picking up so many points in comparison to those at the bottom. It was the biggest gap between the top four and the bottom three that there has ever been at this stage of the season. And there was sort of a worry that was going to continue. And then Luton have brought everybody right back down to earth, which is great. And good to see Sheffield United actually get a win on the board, even though it was in rather controversial circumstances. It wasn't the only controversial decision of the weekend. Once again, there were far too many of those. So let's get into it. Let's start with Luton against Liverpool. 1-1. Luton denied a major scalp. Excellent performance. I think they'll be delighted when they think about it in the cold light of day that they've taken a point against a team like Liverpool. But they were so close to getting all three. And actually was really frustrating at the end when they had an opportunity in the last attack of the game. And instead of trying to square it back to Ross Barkley, I don't know who it was on the right-hand side. Was it Ogbeni who ended up sitting it into Kabore, into the side netting? And you just thought, just set it back to the edge of the penalty area. There's someone there. But that's that sort of game management. It's that sort of game nous, which I think they've got to probably just pick up on over the next few weeks. But I think afterwards, Rob Edwards would have been satisfied with the point.
Yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it? Because when you get so close, you get into the 5th minute of added time and you're leading 1-0 and you don't win the game. Obviously, you're kicking yourselves. But when we spoke to him before the game on talkSPORT, if I'd offered him a point, I'm sure he'd have bitten my arm off. So I think he was proud with the way that the players executed his game plan. I think he was proud that they managed to go toe-to-toe with Liverpool. And actually, you mentioned about decision-making. The decision-making for the goal was terrific because it came from a Liverpool corner. Van Dijk is asking for a handball that was never a handball. Ross Barkley, who had an excellent game along with Andros Townsend, two proven Premier League campaigners, made a big difference for me. and Barkley plays the ball out wide. Kabore, who, as you say, probably made the wrong decision late in the game. He made the right decision this time. Perfectly weighted pass for Tahith Chong, who hadn't been on very long. He finishes it first time. It was an excellent goal from Luton. And again, it was the players executing what Rob Edwards wanted them to do. So I think they'll take a lot of positives. As I say, I think Andros Townsend, first Premier League start since March 2022. He was excellent in the way that he rallied the other players, in the way that he led by example, in the way that him and Barkley kept possession. And Rob Edwards said that was so important after the game, because what you can't do when you're under so much pressure, 24 shots they faced, Liverpool dominated the ball. When you do get it, you can't give it straight back. And Barkley and Townsend, with that Premier League experience, made sure that they didn't do that. And it was a thrilling contest.
Darwin Nunez has missed a lot of chances. He's hit the woodwork a lot since he's been in the Premier League. Dean, you've been a striker. You know what it's like when things aren't going your way. Is he unlucky, or is it an ability problem?
I wouldn't say unlucky, no, because some of the chances are excellent chances that you would expect a top striker to take. I think that's a bit of him. I think he's still developing. I think he still needs to improve that clinicalness. But the volume of opportunities he's getting tells me that he's a super player in that sense. And that can improve, and that will improve, I think, as the games and the seasons go on for Darwin Nunez. But at the moment, it seems like a lot of people are probably having a bit of a chuckle, as if he's, the type of player that will never get it right. I think he will. I just think the volume of chances he's getting is a real positive. It's when you're not getting chances, that's when you need to be very worried as a striker.
Is his movement right? Is the rest of his game up to Premier League standard? Is he elite in every other way apart from that last final bit?
Yes, yeah. I think he's got so many attributes I think you'd want in that position. And I think his movement's decent. I think he obviously still gets himself caught offside, maybe one too many times for my liking. And I think if you look at the very best, even they miss a lot of chances. Look at Haaland this season. Yes, he scored lots of goals, but he's missed a lot of chances. But the best just keep getting in there. And I think he will get better and better. And I think the big thing for him will be, though, is if Jurgen Klopp says, yeah, you're my man, every week you are starting in the big games, I think that'll elevate him and give him the confidence he needs.
Let's talk about Luton. Was it Kenilworth Road at its cliched best, under the lights, with the full fervent atmosphere that we come to expect from a ground as unique as that, Crook?
Yeah, I think it was. And obviously Liverpool usually quite vociferous away from home. I think certainly Luton won the singing contest. And even at the end, after they dropped 2 points, really, Rob Edwards went around. He applauded all four sides of the ground. They were singing his name. I think they've got something. I think they've got character. I think they've got togetherness that maybe we're not seeing from Burnley, for example, at this moment in time. I think most people expected that Burnley would be well ahead of Luton at this stage of the season. They're not. The fact Luton are out of the relegation zone, still haven't won a home Premier League game. They won't come much closer than they did on Sunday. But psychologically, we're a long way into the season now, and they're not in the bottom three. They don't concede the volume of goals that Burnley and Sheffield United have. And I think that's going to set them in good stead. And there are players who are raising themselves to levels that they probably wouldn't have got the opportunity to get to had they not have been promoted to the Premier League. Alfie Doughty, for example, who every time I've seen him this season has been excellent in that wing-back position. Would he have been in the Premier League without Luton? Would someone taken a chance on him? Probably not. Tom Lockyer, who isn't the most imposing of central defenders, I think he really has taken to the Premier League quite well as well. And the goalkeeper, Kaminski, who I saw at Brighton on the opening day of the season, I was far from convinced. He was man of the match on Sunday. He made 5 really top-class saves. So I think what they're doing, they're improving and they're learning every game. I'm not sure you can say that about Burnley and Sheffield United.
Okay, right, let's get to Saturday now. We're going to start at a incident-packed St James's Park. Next up for Newcastle, it's going to be Borussia Dortmund away from home, live on talkSPORT on Tuesday night, 5:45. They had a very difficult weekend. They were beaten by Bayern Munich heavily at home, and Newcastle are the next visitors there. And when Newcastle go there in the Champions League, they'll do so with the wind in their sails. They beat Arsenal by 1-0. I mean, it was, let's say, hotly contested. Shall we say that, Dean? Is that fair?
Yeah, that seems to be a bit between these two sides, stemming from last season and the touchlines as well. And you could sense that right from the off between these two sides. And Havertz is one of those, where he goes about his business quite quietly, but I think he's got that Bergkamp edge in terms of mentality and physicality, lacking obviously the quality, that's for sure, as yet. But, just that a bit bigger than you think, a bit stronger, will leave a little bit on defenders, as Dan Burn has already found out when he played for Chelsea, and obviously did find out at the weekend as well. And it all stemmed pretty much from that challenge.
Yeah, and it was a challenge which I think most people think is probably a red card. It wasn't the only incident that ended up getting scrutinised, whether or not the referee Stuart Atwell and his VAR made the right decisions. There was Bruno Guimaraes' elbow on Jorginho. There was Bruno Guimaraes again on Declan Rice. What did you think? Red cards, yellow cards? I thought the Havertz one, he'd left the ground. He was out of control. I mean, it was an unnecessary challenge. The velocity was ridiculous. It's a red card, isn't it, Crook?
Yeah, and in a stupid area as well. So that tells me actually that he did mean it. And I think Dean's right. There was a bit of afters to what had gone on before. And I think he was very lucky not to be shown a red card. I'm surprised that VAR didn't intervene there. I think Guimaraes should have gone as well. I think that was a deliberate, petulant, aggressive act. And then you get to the goal. And listen, Mikel Arteta's rant is absolutely fantastic. I don't think any of us know if the ball was out of play or not. And I don't think VAR know if the ball was out of play or not. What does annoy me...
So you can't rule it out, right?
No, but what does annoy me, they did rule out the goal that Rasmus Højlund scored for Manchester United against Brighton. And I don't think they know if that ball was out or not either. So again, you're talking about inconsistencies here. Anyway, they allow play to continue. They freely admitted, the PGMOL, they didn't know if it was offside because they couldn't draw the line in the right place because there were too many bodies in the way. But they were given a massive get-out because there was doubt in their mind that maybe the ball could have gone out of play. Maybe it could have been offside. But what isn't in doubt for me, it's a foul. Both arms on the back of the defender. It's an aggressive act. It's a foul. And the fact that they're not sure about the other two decisions, common sense, okay, look, we've got to get out of here. Let's just disallow the goal for a foul. Nobody will complain. There's not going to be any controversy. They didn't do that. They allowed the goal to stand. And I can understand why Arsenal are so upset by it.
Yeah, well, listen, it was a bit sort of channeling of Kevin Keegan by Mikel Arteta, so let's hear it.
But this is really the question, guys. The question is, it's not a goal. It's simple. It's not a goal. Simple. Sorry? Because for a goal to be allowed, there are certain things prior to that the ball hitting 1 meter from the goal that are not allowed in football. In here, in China, in Japan, in Spain, in Italy, and in Portugal. They are not allowed. That's what happens. Nothing. I have to stand here now and explain. And we lost 3 points today, guys. You know what that means? It's too hard, this league. It's too hard. It's too much at stake. It's embarrassing.
I actually didn't think it was a foul. I thought that Gabriel had stooped down to head the ball away and Joel Linton had just put his hands on his back. I don't think he pushed him. It certainly wasn't like a forceful push that pushed him to the ground. He was already going down. Yeah, I mean, look, whether the goal... I think the key thing is that they didn't have enough evidence to overturn the goal, so therefore they let the goal, which is good, because one of the things that's been annoying me this weekend in particular is that it feels as if they are trying their hardest to find a way to rule out goals. And I don't think that's what VAR should be there for. Do you, Dean? I think, 3 minutes 47 at the Fulham Manchester United game that I was at, to sort of decide whether or not a offside had been perpetrated in the build-up to that McTominay goal. I mean, that's ludicrous to me. It looks like you're trying to find a way to chalk things off.
I think they're in a position where definitely since the Tottenham-Liverpool game, it feels like every decision, they're taking a long time to make sure that it's right, and they're probably checking absolutely everything so they don't miss anything that then comes back to be questioned after the game that they've possibly missed. I've been in that position. Joe Linton definitely edges him out. I wouldn't say he like forcefully pushes, but he is definitely edging him out to try and head it. But I think
you'd be disappointed if that was given against you. If that was a foul given against you, you would be disappointed.
I'd be gutted because I wouldn't expect it to be a foul. But the one thing I would say is I think they are so desperate not to overturn decisions that are borderline as such, and they have tried to stay with the referees. I think we've seen that a couple of times over the last couple of weeks where once the decision's made on field, they try to avoid to change that. And that was one of those cases. There just wasn't the evidence for them, or clear and obvious, as they like to say, to change it. But it's such a massive call, isn't it?
It's a massive call, but once the referee's made that call, is there enough evidence to overturn it, do you think?
No, I don't. No, I don't think there's enough personally, but I think that is open to interpretation for sure. As you know, Crook feels like it's a foul. Me and you don't think it's hugely a foul. So that's, again, VAR is not built for grey areas.
No, it isn't. But it was great to hear Mikel Arteta come out and be anything other than grey. He was definitely black and white, and he actually was quite bold about it as well. For us journalists, you said it was brilliant to listen to, Crook, and for us, it is great. You know, it's a bit of fun. We're not Arsenal fans, and we are journalists, and this is great copy for us. But I'm not necessarily sure that it's a great thing, is it? I mean, losing his cool like that.
Well, it creates a siege mentality, because I came home from Brentford on Saturday night. My wife's a massive Arsenal fan. She was absolutely raging, and I sort of understood it. But then I watched the goal again. David Raya's part in the goal shouldn't be understated, because actually it shouldn't have got as far as being headed back across the box. I said that last night in our group that
we were texting in. No one wanted to talk about that.
He's got to stop the cross. And again, I think that let's break this down to Arsenal. Did they play well enough to win that game? I don't think they did. Have they got a proper number 9 who is going to give them the edge in tight games against the really good sides in the Premier League? In Eddie Nketiah, maybe even in Gabriel Jesus, the answer is no. They spent so much money on Kai Havertz, apart from the ridiculous tackle that he made. Again, it's another game where he's made no real contribution for that £65 million. Surely Mikel Arteta would have been better spending that on a number 9 to actually give them the chance to go and win those tight games. And then you've got the goalkeeping situation where Aaron Ramsdale looked a little bit nervous and made a couple of errors against West Ham, certainly one error in midweek. David Raya looks a bag of nerves every time they take the pitch. So again, he's created a situation there where neither goalkeeper really knows if they're the number 1 or not. I think the decisions that Mikel Arteta made in this summer transfer window are going to cost Arsenal a shot at the title. I don't see them as contenders, and I think that's on him.
But you've said that before, isn't it? That's not a new development, isn't it? You're recycling something you've said previously. We know that you don't think that Kai Havertz is the answer to the goal-scoring problems. We know that David Raya is. You think that decision has unsettled both goalkeepers rather than enhanced them. The question really is he a little bit unfortunate as well, Dean? Because some of the players that he's brought in, and Jurriën Timber is one of those, have picked up injuries. Jesus has picked up an injury. Is he a little bit unfortunate that some of the key components of his team have actually gone out with injury, and therefore that's meant that he's had to rely on Havertz more than maybe he thought he was going to?
Possibly, but I think Eddie Howe would turn around and say, well, I was dealt the same hand, and I'm able to get a performance out of my players, whether that's away at Old Trafford or at home to Arsenal. I was really disappointed, actually, with Arsenal's performance, actually, in such a big game. If you want to be title contenders, I think you've got to show a little bit more. Even Bukayo Saka, I thought, was pretty poor.
Because he's been overplayed.
Innocuous in that game. Because he's been overplayed, of course. Look, I think it's difficult at the moment for Mikel Arteta. He'll want his injuries back, of course he will. But I think in these bigger games, I think there's just something missing in midfield. And I'm not saying Declan Rice has been excellent, but there's something else missing. Odegaard's not reached the levels. That balance that they seemed to have last season doesn't look the same this season at the moment. And Havertz, I mean, the only positive was that I think it was certainly in the first half, he had the most regains. I think he's in the team actually for his work ethic, which that is a lot of money to pay for work ethic.
His height is quite good. They like him because they can kick the ball long to him and take the pressure off the defence if they need to and start building from higher up the pitch is one of the other reasons why they bought him, I think. But yeah, his quality levels aren't as good as others, that's for sure. But he is allowed to get one wrong, you know, and it's only sort of like the first 3 months of his Arsenal career. They've done quite well in recruitment over the last year and a half or so. So it's very difficult to sort of batter him because he's picked one player, which hasn't quite worked out.
He's picked two. He didn't need to do what he's done with the goalkeeper.
Really? You haven't said that before?
Well, yeah, but you can say that. But in this game, those flaws, that decision-making from the summer came back to haunt him. I fancied Arsenal going into this game, and then I saw the team sheet, and I saw Jorginho in midfield and no Odegaard, and I thought, this could be a problem.
We'll see what happens with Arsenal. I think it's great for Newcastle because they've moved further up the table. They've started to show that I thought the way they've recovered from some of their setbacks has been brilliant, actually. Let's move on to Sheffield United versus Wolverhampton Wanderers. They beat them by 2-1. But, boy, was it in controversial circumstances. The end of the game was intoxicating, wasn't it? I mean, because Bellegarde scores an equaliser late on in the match, and then you have the non-penalty. And what was it like being in the stadium, Dean?
Well, I mean, to be honest, the first sort of 60, 70 minutes was horrendous in terms, especially the first half. The first half, honestly, Sheffield United, I felt sorry for them. I felt sorry for their fans. It must have been depressing watching them. Archer and Brewster up front, especially Brewster didn't look fit and obviously eventually came off injured. And actually that changed things. And it just changed the shape slightly. It meant that Archer was up there on his own, but he had support from McAtee, who was brilliant in the second half on the right-hand side, and then Harmer on the left, but really tight and close to Archer. And it changed because I think if Neto had played, Wolves would have been 2-0 up probably in the first half. But Archer, brilliant finish. Realised that he was getting closed down, took aim, brilliant strike. And then you just sort of think it's typical that you look like you're going to get a victory, a hard-fought victory, and then they go and score a nothing goal, really, Wolves. But then, honestly, you've got 10 seconds to go, and I'm just talking from the referee's point of view. There's 10 seconds to go. There's a melee in the box, and a Sheffield United player throws himself to the floor. Straight away, you've got to be thinking, I need to check this. This has to be checked because there's 10 seconds to go. And I can understand why Robert Jones gave the decision on field because in the moment it looked like Fabio Silva had tried to clear the ball and Baldock had been kicked. But I'm sorry, you look at that replay, there's not a chance. There's not a world where that's a penalty. It's the same one as Fabian Schär and Hwang the week before for Wolves. If a player pulls out and the player falls over, we all know. We know that Baldock is throwing himself to the floor for the penalty. How can you not see that?
What is really scary is the fact that Gary O'Neill went into the referee's room after the game. Robert Jones sat down with him and watched that incident back and said, you can see that there is contact. And Gary O'Neill's like, yeah, but that doesn't mean it's a penalty. And that's the other thing that I can't get my head around, that we use contact as an excuse. Like any contact should be a foul. That is not the case. That's never been the case. That never can be the case in a contact sport. The fact is that you always have moments where people do come together. That it's clearly not a penalty. But the fact that the referee has convinced himself that it is, or that the refereeing fraternity have convinced themselves that it is a bigger concern than the fact that it was given in the first place.
It's a huge problem. And it's a huge problem for Howard Webb because on the face of it, standards seem to be getting worse on his watch. There seem to be more of these kind of incidents week in, week out. And we've said it before, Sam, on this podcast. You get one poor VAR decision in one big game, and then there seems to be a domino effect We haven't talked about Fulham Manchester United yet. I don't believe the McTominay goal should have been ruled out. I think that sets the tone for the weekend. But this one at Bramall Lane is far and away the worst decision. And if you're Gary O'Neill and you're Wolverhampton Wanderers, you start to think there's some kind of agenda against you, because Onana on the first day of the season, the Fabian Schär one last weekend, this one now, even going back to when Gary O'Neill was in charge of Bournemouth, these type of shockingly bad decisions seem to be following him around. It's really unfair, because Dean's right. Without Pedro Neto, it's going to be a struggle for Wolves, not just on Saturday, but moving forward. Looks like they've battled back and got themselves a point which would have been acceptable. All of a sudden, they've lost in stoppage time to such a poor decision. That's really hard to justify and really hard to rationalise in your head if you're Gary O'Neill.
Absolutely. But the worst thing about even what Crook has said there is that there is no agenda against Gary O'Neill. There's no conspiracy against him. It's just that they make that many bad decisions that often that he ends up being on the wrong end just because of the balance of probabilities. That in itself has got to change, hasn't it? It's ridiculous. There's just the number of game-changing incidents that we've had in the early weeks of this season. What on earth do we put it down to? Because it wasn't even this bad last year.
I would say it's incompetence is what it is. It can only be that, because I'm not. I
is
don't
it lack
even
of
think...
feel for the game? Is it the fact that
Yes,
because Rob Jones turning around and pointing straight to the penalty spot after that incident, I thought, what on earth are you doing? Why are you even getting involved? Because you know for a fact, if there's a blatant penalty there and you just let it go, someone's going to tell you that there was a penalty anyway. So you do not need to rush to judgment in that circumstance.
That's a great point.
Because then if it's only a sort of 60% penalty, you're giving that in those circumstances. It's crazy. Why is he doing that? That's got to be a lack of feel for the game.
Yeah, I agree, but I also think that, and I know that you like to study and read the laws of the game, Sam, when you're at night, but it's down to that. Cool. It's down to the reading. It's down to the reading of the laws of the game, and they're trying to apply that to a game that has to have feel and has to have understanding of how players act and how players are trying and desperately trying at times to deceive you as referees. And that sounds horrible, but that is the truth. And just applying laws because there is a bit of contact, that is a lack of feel for the game. So when we all watch it, we can't get our heads around it.
No, on Thursday's pod, though, we did sort of talk about whether or not Paul Heckingbottom should keep his job as the manager and whether they should stick by him, despite the fact that he hadn't yet got a win. He has got one now, the last Premier League side to do that. In fact, I think they're the last side in the entire 4 divisions of English football to get a league win this season. It is a good 3 points for him, but they're still way behind even where Derby were at this stage of the season. Does it look to you like it's already going to be 3 from 4? And by that, I mean Sheffield United, Luton, Burnley and Bournemouth.
I think it does. Yeah, when you look at the gap between those 4 and the teams above them, obviously we're waiting to see what happens with Everton in terms of a point deduction. That would change the landscape. But actually, the way that Everton are playing, if they don't get a points deduction, I don't particularly fear they'll go down. I think Wolves are going to have a difficult spell now all the time that Pedro Neto is sidelined, but I think eventually they'll have too much. So yeah, I think it is 3 from 4. And at the moment, if anybody's going to keep up Luton, Sheffield United or Burnley, you've got to say it's going to be Bournemouth. But big win for Paul Heckingbottom and actually a big win for the fans, because we know that the owners were teetering on the brink of sacking Heckingbottom after that Arsenal defeat. I'm told it was only really the negative reaction towards that idea from the Sheffield United fans that forced a change of heart. And I think the fans and Paul Heckingbottom will feel rewarded by this victory. And they do have a run of games now in the next 3 or 4 weeks where they potentially could pick up some points.
We shall see. Let's look at some of Saturday's other action now, including a game that started the weekend at Craven Cottage. Yes, I went to Fulham 0, Manchester United 1. The first half was very 0-0 and very 50-50. The second half, I thought Fulham actually were the much better side. They had 2 great opportunities to win the game. And then Bruno popped up with one moment of composure and skill after Fulham lost their heads trying to clear inside the penalty area and scored the only goal of the game. But performance once again, Dean, was lacklustre. Erik ten Hag afterwards tried to tell me that he thought that it was a very solid, good performance. I would suggest that was over-egging the pudding.
Yeah, it was an average performance. I thought defensively they did okay at times, but I thought Fulham were the better side. I think going forward, that is a big, big worry for Ten Hag. It has to be, with the changes that he made, with the lack of service for Højlund. I'm looking at him as a new striker that you want to get off to a good start at your new club. The lack of opportunities that he's been given and service from either the flanks or through the middle is, I think, a big, big worry, actually. And they've got away with a victory, and it's massive, by the way, the victory for Manchester United, and they won't care how they get it. But you can't cover the fact that going forwards, they need a lot of work.
They need a lot of work, but they've also needed a lot of luck to get the points that they've already got. I mean, if you think that, he said earlier in the season, didn't he, Erik ten Hag, everything's against us. Well, actually, in terms of picking up points, everything's been for them, because they don't deserve half the number of victories that they've got up until this point. And this was another one of those which probably you can understand why Marco Silva felt so hard done by. McTominay admitted that he saw the flag in the away end, and that sort of made them play better. That inspired them. It said, play like you mean it. Shouldn't they be doing that anyway?
Yeah, they should, but it's a brilliant banner because it's a simple message, but it's what 95% of Manchester United fans are feeling and thinking at this moment in time. Dean described it as a massive win there. I understand where he's coming from, particularly for Ten Hag, but I think it will only be a massive win if they follow it up in Copenhagen, live on talkSPORT in midweek, and keep alive their hopes in the Champions League. And if they beat Luton and beat Luton well at Old Trafford next Saturday, if they can do both those things, then I think the complexion and the picture will change heading into this international break. If they don't, then once again it'll be one step forward and two back. I think I'd like to pick out Pellistri as someone who deserves a bit of credit. Yes, it was terrible defending from Fulham, but it was tenacious from him and committed to keep Manchester United on the front foot in the build-up to that Bruno goal. Not sure we've seen that from either Marcus Rashford or from Antony this season. And Garnacho as well. I think he actually had a really positive impact going forward. But Dean's right. We've been saying it all season. Højlund needs to be serviced a lot more. The Rashford situation is a fascinating one because he gets a public dressing down, quite rightly, in my opinion, for going to that nightclub last Sunday after the Derby defeat. And then all of a sudden he picks up an injury in training and isn't available. I wonder how much of an injury that really was.
A heavy knock. Yeah. Failed a fitness test the next day. Is that nonsense, Dean? Is that nonsense? Is that just discipline?
It feels it, yeah. It feels it's hard to get away from it, to be honest. But I was thinking about Marcus Rashford, and I was thinking, why has the change been so stark? And actually, it just dawned on me. It's because Luke Shaw's not playing. Without that player that gives him the ball and then underlaps or overlaps him, actually, he struggles. He does. Honestly, I think it's as simple as that.
He struggled in Bayern Munich when he had Reguilon bombing up and down the touchline and feeding him the ball, though, didn't he?
It's not the same. It's not the same. I think we underestimate how good Luke Shaw is, and I think he's probably the biggest miss to that Manchester United team because so much of their play comes down that side when he plays.
And I'm sure you're absolutely right in terms of Shaw is of a certain quality which brings the best out of other players around him. But that is not an excuse for a serious number of poor performances off the back of him not being there, right?
No, I'm not saying all the performances, but I'm saying certainly Rashford in particular. And I think he probably is one of the, if not the most influential players, actually, when I've been thinking about what they're missing.
Interesting to see what happens when he comes back, because he's been out for some while and he's still not yet to come back. What about Harry Maguire? How much credit does he deserve? It was a worrying head injury, actually, and he took it inside the first couple of minutes. And I know that the club have said that the second injury, where he had to have received treatment, the referee stopped the game and said, hold on, you need to look at here. I'm not comfortable with the way you're behaving. They say it was a hand injury. It didn't look like a hand injury. And hand injuries don't usually make referees go over and stop football matches. Maybe that was the case. They say they followed all protocols. Whether it was right or whether it was wrong that he stayed on the field of play, the way that he conducted himself, I thought showed this is a guy who wants to play for Manchester United, wants to do a good job, and showed the character that many have been missing.
Agreed. And I think he has been a real shining light in the last few weeks for that reason, because, listen, he knows he gets stick. He knows that he's not everybody's favourite player in terms of the fan base. He probably knows that in reality, Erik ten Hag would rather have sold him in the transfer window. But he wanted to stay. He wanted to fight for his place. You were one of the first to report that on talkSPORT. And I think he's shown that with his performances in recent weeks. And actually, I think at the moment, he's probably undroppable. He's probably the first name on the team sheet when it comes to that back line.
We talked about what has to happen next in order for Manchester United's manager, Erik ten Hag, to keep sort of that feeling of relief and the pressure sort of falling off his shoulders. He's got a game against Copenhagen on Wednesday night. It's not an easy game. We've already seen Copenhagen and the way they play and the energy that they play with. They're not a brilliant side, but they were able to cause Manchester United problems at Old Trafford. How difficult is this trip going to be in midweek live on talkSPORT, Dean, do you think?
Yeah, it will be difficult, of course. It's going to be an absolutely ginormous game for Copenhagen and their supporters, and they're not going to make it easy.
Because they're trying to save themselves as well.
Yeah, it's amazing what a victory like that could do, especially late on, and you could see the celebrations from the players. You've got to hope, if you're in that group, that it gives them a huge lift. But the performance level's still got to be better than it has been. They've got to have more control of the game. I was actually very surprised that ten Hag almost sort of bit on the bait and tried to explain exactly how he wants to play and talked about his time at Ajax and the players that he gets. I was surprised he went into that. I felt he should have just kept that more close to his chest and be doing that on the training pitch and not have to explain himself as such.
Showed he's under pressure.
But you've got to try. Yeah, great point. And I just think they've got to try and ride this momentum of the weekend and hope that lifts the players, because something's not going to automatically change in 3 days tactically or in terms of the players being set up in a different way. So you've got to try and ride the confidence, hopefully.
Yeah, it was a bit stupid to turn around and say we can't play like Ajax because we haven't got the players when you bought half the players and half the players came from Ajax. It was a very strange thing to say. Plus, there was other teams that haven't got that level of quality of players and definitely haven't spent 400 million quid over 3 transfer windows that do play quite well, even though they haven't got the superstars. Brentford 3, West Ham United 2. Crookie was there. Topsy-turvy game at the G-Tech. But a goal for Neil Maupay. And I must admit, I was very happy for him when I saw this come through. I was on my way back from the Fulham game. I saw that he'd scored, and I thought, oh, great. Now, do we think that Matthias Cunha will score one next, and then maybe Raul Jimenez? That sort of race for who can go on the longest drought will be over?
Well, these things do come in 3, as the saying goes. So watch this space with those two. But yeah, there was no more popular scorer at the weekend. The Brentford fans absolutely adore Maupay. Speaking to Nathan Collins, winning goal scorer for Brentford in the tunnel, live on talkSPORT after the game. Clearly the players do as well. And I think when it comes to attitude and endeavour, Maupay is a shining light for underperforming players, because despite the fact that he hadn't scored for 350 years, he never stopped trying and he never stopped taking on the shots. So credit to him for that. But you know what? This was probably the best game I've seen all season. It was a really fiercely contested match, a London derby. Brian Mbeumo was brilliant for Brentford. Mohamed Kudus, superb for West Ham, scored a goal of the season contender. And it did get me thinking, and we've just been talking about it. Anthony, 80 million quid. Kudus, from the same club, less than half that. Did Ten Hag go in for the wrong winger or what? Because he looks a really good player and he's settled in the Premier League right away for West Ham.
It It was. I think we're always a little bit baffled as to why £85 million was the price tag for Anthony, bearing in mind he can only kick with one foot. Dino, you've been a striker, yet you've never gone over 400 days without scoring. Can you imagine how Neil Maupay was feeling when the ball hit the back of the net? Was he thinking, "Oh my God, here comes VAR"?
Probably, yeah, which is why I'm so glad it wasn't around when I played. I think I went 10 games without scoring, and that felt like a lifetime. It's horrible because that is what you are. That's what you become, is you're judged on goals. And if you don't score the goals, it's amazing how it chips away at your confidence and away from the pitch as well, as to who you exactly are. So for him, I'm glad for him, that's for sure. I thought, like Crookie said, your interview with Collins was brilliant. He sort of opened up a bit in terms of what he's clearly like around the place. And it was a terrific game, you're right. And the only thing I would say is West Ham cannot keep a clean sheet. And I don't know whether it's David Moyes feeling like he's having to open up the play. The signings they've made have maybe opened up that, but they look like they're going to score plenty of goals. And they look more entertaining, actually, the games that they play in. And that just doesn't feel like a David Moyes team. And you know, they're on a bad run at the moment in the Premier League. 1
win in 7 in the league for West Ham. They've probably frustrated David Moyes quite a bit with their defending. Maybe they've become a bit of a cup team, which is not ideal, I don't think. Especially, listen, they'll get away with it this year because there's no way that they'll be sucked into a relegation battle. But it's not what the Hammers fans were expecting. Defending for a couple of the goals actually was dreadful. Mavropanos got himself into an awful knock twice. And the fact that they fell for the long throw, recycled ball to the back edge of the 6-yard box, and then Colin steams in and gets the winner. I mean, that was pretty basic, really, and they should have dealt with that, but they didn't. And as a result, they ended up losing that game. Bournemouth backed up their victory last weekend by losing 6-1 at Manchester City. I think we all saw something like that coming. What we didn't see coming was that Erling Haaland would not score a goal or assist a goal, despite the fact that City scored half a dozen. Bad news for fantasy fans, unless, Crook, they had delicious Doku.
Yeah, absolutely. As someone who hasn't got Haaland in his team, and it's a bit of a gamble, I was delighted, but I captained Salah, so I didn't have much of a better weekend either. But yeah, Doku, absolutely brilliant, to be fair. It's becoming a problem, isn't it, for Jack Grealish in a European Championship year, because when you've got someone who's come in, plays in your position, has taken to the Premier League like a duck to water, you do wonder how he's going to get a place in the team back on a regular basis. And what's impressive here, we often say it, don't we, that players coming into a Pep Guardiola team, particularly from foreign shores, take a season to acclimatise. He's taken about 5 minutes, Doku. And
it's unbelievable.
It's incredible. And I felt a bit sorry for Chris Mepham on one of the goals, by the way, because Chris Mepham's not played a lot of football in the Premier League this season. He got absolutely tied in knots, didn't he, for one of those goals?
What was the reason for changing the goalkeeper? Was Neto suspended?
He's injured.
I thought, who's Radu? I've never even heard of him before.
Yeah, they signed him in the summer, and they've also recalled Mark Travers from on loan at Stoke. That's a big miss, actually, Neto, not just in terms of on the pitch, in terms of shot stopping and distribution, but he's a massive character in a still relatively young Bournemouth team, so they will miss him.
Yeah, Alex got off injured as well, having just returned from an injury, is a bit of a worry. It will remains to be seen how Manchester City get on in midweek. They've got more Champions League action to come. Right, let's move on to Monday Night Football, because Chelsea are going to Tottenham Hotspur for what is a huge game. It's the return of Maurizio Pochettino. So this is Monday Night Football. Poch back at Spurs. Ian Abrahams asked the best question probably ever asked to a football manager when he said to Maurizio Pochettino in the press conference on Friday, is it going to be like meeting up with an ex-girlfriend? And he said, I don't know, because I've been married to my wife for 32 years and I don't even remember if I had a girlfriend before her, which I thought was very diplomatic, because it's clearly not true, but he just didn't want to upset his wife. Brilliant. So Maurizio Pochettino is going back to the scene of his glory days in Tottenham Hotspur. How are Chelsea going to negotiate this, Dean? Because this is a tough task.
Yeah, it is. I've been so impressed with Tottenham since Ange Postecoglou took over. I think there is gaps, and I'm still waiting for a team to exploit the fact that both Pedro Porro and whether it's Adoji or Emerson Royale or whoever plays as a left back, because they both go into midfield. At times, I watch Pedro Porro and he's playing in the centre forward position. So there has to be gaps in those fullback areas for Chelsea to exploit. And I am waiting for a team to really exploit those areas. I know Romero and Van der Ven have been outstanding when they get taken into those areas, but I think Chelsea have got the players that could cause an issue in those areas.
But Dean, they can do this, right? Because Mickey Van der Ven is faster than a Porsche 911.
He is, but he's not always in that position. And surely there must be a way of pulling him out of that position. I just haven't seen it yet. And maybe that is because Tottenham have executed it extremely well. But that's where I see Chelsea's strengths is in wide areas.
Well, it's certainly not through the middle, is it? That's for sure. Should Chelsea play split strikers like they did the other week in the game against Arsenal and 2 number 10s, Crook, in this match?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he adopts a similar approach because, again, you'd imagine that Tottenham are going to want to try and dominate the possession. So maybe Chelsea are going to adopt a counter punch approach as they did for a lot of that game. Having watched Chelsea in midweek labour to victory really against a Blackburn side who were no great shakes, they missed a lot of chances in that game. Nicholas Jackson already looks like his confidence is shot to bits. I just wonder and I worry where the goals are going to come from. I just think Tottenham have got more firepower. You know, you look at the way that Maddison's playing, Son, Kulusevski. I think Brennan Johnson will start this game after the impact he made off the bench in their last match. And I think in those forward areas, they will be too strong. Not sure there's masses between the two teams defensively, particularly if Badiashile is fit enough to start. I think he's going to be a real positive for Chelsea if he can stay fit. But just in those forward areas, I think they've got too much, Tottenham. I think it'll be a disappointing return for Pochettino.
Okay, Ange Postecoglou has been making significant waves as well with his expert nimbleness in press conferences and in interviews. He's very sort of dry humour has gone down well. He also has encouraged the Tottenham fans to dare to dream. I quite like this, right? Because let's be completely clear. Why shouldn't Tottenham fans get a little bit excited? They're doing what Arsenal did last year. They're pushing Manchester City. They may well not beat Manchester City. They may well not end up winning the league. But last year, they were really bad. It was boring. Watching Tottenham used to make you go to sleep. Actually fall asleep. You could watch Tottenham and you would fall asleep. It was almost like as soon as you put them on, within 2 minutes, nothing happened. You were just snoozing. This year, it's completely different, right, Dean? They're fun. They're energetic. They've got Maddison, a bit of flair. It's Tottenham. It's to dare is to do. It's the old Tottenham style. It's good to hope that you can win. It's good to think that actually something might be happening. Yes?
Yes, yeah, I think it is. But I think everybody else is thinking, does Ange Postecoglou know anything about the history of Tottenham Hotspur? Because this is what they have done. It is, and
not usually for this long.
If you're a Tottenham, no, and I don't see it crumbling very soon at all. Because I think the way they're playing, the confidence that they've shown, they're yet to be tested with players missing, and I mean key players. We will see how they get on if that was to happen. But you're right. You can't be one of those fans that just doesn't hope and doesn't dream that your team can go and contend, and they should enjoy this football.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. We're looking forward to it. It's 8 o'clock on Monday night. On Tuesday night, we've got Dortmund against Newcastle, 5:45, talkSPORT 2. And then 8 o'clock, Atletico Madrid against Celtic. Wednesday night, it's 2 games for you. Copenhagen against Manchester United. We'll keep an eye on City as well. And Thursday, it's Toulouse against Liverpool. in the Europa League. We'll be back on Thursday afternoon, Friday morning, to bring you a preview to the weekend. We look forward to it. Make sure you tell all your friends about Premier League All Access from talkSPORT.